Okay, cinema sex nistoa go o dakito ke antaxistiko dakte boy conversation dakte boy greetings. Okay, so now share my screen, and today we're going to go over greetings, and I'm going to show you some greetings that we use, or how you can greet someone, or how you can meet someone in Blackfeet or in Blackfoot. And so by doing that, I'm going to show you an example conversation and then show you some grammar points within that conversation to help you with Blackfoot. So our conversation, or that's a meeting, it's going to be between two people. And Tsaotsi. So I'll read and go over so you can follow along, and then I'll go to the next person so you can follow along. Okay. Okay. Six, t, Gatsikist. Saltsi. Ah, Chiksamatsi. Ti. Otakokitope. Ah, Nitaniku otakokitope. Kisto? Saltsi. Ah, nistu Nitaniku. Saltsi. Otakokitope. Iksamatsimutati yo. Saltsi. Ah, Sukape. Otakokitope. Tsama ke mochtu tu saltsi. Ano mochtu tu mochgenstes. Gisto? Otakokitope. Nisto no mochtu tu sekohkotok. Saltsi. Sakanistsistoyemsp. Netanistsistoyem. Nani si kupoto. Gisto? Saltsi. Nisto ne doi. Otakokitope. Tsema kitatwisksenematsu go. Saltsi. Nitsatwisksenematsu go. Mohgenstis. Gisto? Takokitope. Nisto ne doi. Kitakitamatsen. Saltsi. Kitakitamatsit-sipsato. Again. So now I'll go over it again, but I'll give the English translation of these words as well. So tatsi-sen, or a meeting. So our first character's name is Otakokitope, and our second is Tsaotsi. So Otakokitope starts with saying, okay, tix tsi katsikist, which is hello. Then tix tsi means I like, and then katsikist, your shoes. So he's saying, hello, I like your shoes. Then Tsaotsi says, tsi. Yes, thank you. Tsi. There's a couple of ways that we could say thank you in Blackfeet, and this is kind of the most simple one. We'd use this for compliments. So yeah, it's kind of a basic thank you. Tsi. And then otakokitopi says, netaniko otakokitopi. Gisto? Which means, yes, my name is Otakokitopi. You? And when we want to ask somebody, what about you? We just say gisto. Gisto? Then Tsaotsi says, nisto nitaniko Tsaotsi. And so you can notice that the way that he introduces himself and the way that Tsaotsi introduces himself is a little bit different. Otakokitopi just says nitaniko, whereas Tsaotsi says nisto nitaniko. And they both mean the same thing. There's really no difference between them. However, nisto is just kind of it's just kind of yeah, it doesn't change the meaning. It's just kind of like saying for myself. So you could think of it as Otakokitopi is saying my name is, and then Tao is saying, oh well, for me, my name is. And so that's kind of how that works. But nisto isn't needed. It's just kind of emphasis is the word I was looking for. Okay. And then otakakitopi says, Iksamatsamotatsiyok. Iksamatsamotatsiyok means it kind of means nice to meet you, but it literally means like it's nice that we met each other. And then Tsatsi says, suka. It's just it literally means yes, it is good, but we use this phrase a lot. Suka. Just kind of means oh good. And then otakakitopi says, Tsama kimohtu to, which means where do you come from? And then Tsatsi says, no mohginstis. Gisto? Which means I come from Calgary, and you? Mohginstis is our word for Calgary. It literally means elbow, and it's referring to the Elbow River. Then Ordakokitopi says, Nisto no mohtu to sekohkitok. Tsatsi says, Takan is just stoyem. So the same thing with here. Nisto no mohtu to sekohkitok. Nisto kind of means like for myself. No mohtu I come from. So it's just adding emphasis. And then sekohkitok means Lethbridge. So he's saying, I myself come from Lethbridge, or sekohkitok, which literally means black rock. And it's referring to the mines in kind of the coal, because of the mines in Lethbridge. And Tsatsi says, Tsakanis, which means yes. And how old are you? And this yes doesn't really make sense when you translate it to English. That's just kind of like almost a filler word in Blackfeet. We use it a lot. It means yes, but the meaning can be interpreted as more than just the simple English yes. It's just kind of like it helps the conversation to flow when you say Then next, otakukitopi says, which means I'm 18 years old. What about you? And so nitanististoyam is how we introduce your age. It literally means like my age is one way to look at it, but it literally does mean the winters that I have, the winters that I've endured, the winters that I've survived, because we look at age in terms of winters. And I'll explain that a little bit more later. The nanisi kopido is just the number 18. Then yeah. Then Tsaotsis is nistonitoy, which means the same for me, essentially, or same thing. And it literally means nistonitoy means kind of for me, the same. Nitoy means the same. Then otakukitopi says, which means yes. And where do you go to school? And so this kind of looks like a long word, and I'll just break it down a little bit. Sama just means where, so that's a question word. And then I guess you could look at the verb in this is itotusk. I have it spelled wrong. There should be an it. Like I have it in here. My apologies, but itotusk means kind of means to be educated, to go to be educated at a place. So literally means where do you go to get educated? And then Tsaotsi says which means I go to get educated, I go to learn, I go to be taught at Mohginstis, Calgary. And you? Tanotakitopi once again says Nistunitoi. We just saw this Nistunitoi, so think for a second of what it means. And then he says Kitakitamatsin. We should have also seen this before. Kitakitamatsin. And then but Nistunitoi Kitakitamatsin means kind of the same for me. So he's also saying that he goes to school in Calgary. And then Kitakitamatsin just means I'll see you later. And then Tsatsi says, which means, yes, I will talk to you later. I will talk to you again. Means, I'll see you again. And then I'll talk to you again. And so we use both of these when we want to end a conversation. But is a little bit more common. We most use this when we're talking to someone in person. You could also use gedagdamatsitsipsat when you're talking to someone in person, but we also use it on the phone. You never really say gedagdamatsin when you're saying goodbye on the phone. It doesn't really make sense because you're not seeing them on the phone. And so that's kind of when we use gedagdamatsitsipsat. So that's a little bit of the difference between the two phrases. And so now I'm going to show some grammar points with this. First, I'm going to talk about the non-factive. And so the non-factive is a grammar point that we've seen a couple times in this. And we see it in the forms of ishp and in the forms of ach. Remember from the last video that this 1 mark makes ish and 2 marks makes ach. And so they are the same thing. It's the same concept, same grammar point. We just use them following different vowel sounds or even consonant sounds. So for instance, we see the ishp after the we see the ishp after an e sound or even after a consonant. So we see it in the word ganististoyimsp, which means your age, or it's your age in a question. And then we see och after a or o, or sounds similar to those. So for instance, gimochtu duch, which is another phrase that we've seen. But you might be wondering, what is the non-factive? And the non-factive kind of has two different meanings in Blackfoot. Well, it has one meaning, but we use it in two different ways. So the first way that we use it, and the way that I've showed you in these two instances, is when we're asking a question. And so what non-factive means, it means it's not happening. Not as in the sense that it's fake or that it's unreal or that it never happens. It just means that you're not describing the verb or the sentence as if it were happening right now. So for instance, with this, it means the place that you come from, essentially. And so we use it, if you could recall from our conversation, in a phrase, for example, which means where do you come from? And the reason that we use the non-factive is because if we took it out and we just said we'd be saying you come from there, as in it's happening right now, or means you came from there, as if it's already been done. But we use as to kind of describe it as an abstract idea. You know, where do you come from is kind of more of an abstract question because you're not really asking about anything that's occurred. You're not describing the word to arrive, as if it happened or is happening, because it's kind of just an idea. And the same thing with which means like your age. So we saw it in our conversation with how old are you? And it's the same thing. And this is a little bit more hard to explain, but you could just think of it as the ishp is there because it's a question. Because you're not stating that you've survived, or that you're not stating anything about the winters that they've gone through. You're asking about it and you're not making any statements about it happening or if it happened. It's just kind of up in the air. It's an abstract idea, essentially. And so, and the other way that we use the non-factive, like I said, there's two. That was the first way, primarily when we want to kind of make it an abstract idea. Mostly when we're talking about questions, that's the most of the time that we use it is in a question. But the other way is when we're talking about a negative, because like I said, non-factive means it's not happening. So that happens the one way with the question, but it can also happen the other way, as in it's negative, it's not happening. You're stating that it's not happening. And so that's the other way that we use the non-factive. And I should point out that we only use this kind of form of the non-factive in negatives, as in saying it's not happening, when we're talking about the first or the second person. So if I'm talking about myself, or if I'm talking about you, the listener, not if I'm talking about somebody else, then we use a different non-factive. But this is just an example to kind of help with my question. Saying the winters that I've endured. How many winters have you endured? So we can kind of see the stuff that we have to add when we're making a question. Another example, before I get into the negative side, nitsa I sit or I live at. Oh, before I go on, I should mention that it's winters because winter traditionally is a very hard time. And so you kind of measure your age based on how many winters you've endured, because it kind of is just you could look at it as a trophy of how tough you are. If you make it through this many winters, that's just how we measure it, because winter is so hard to get through with famine and with the cold, that it's just easier to kind of measure somebody by the winters that they've lived through. And then the next one, nitsadalpe, means I sit at, but we use it in the sense of I live at. And so it's another traditional thing. Traditionally within our lodges, you sit in your lodge. So that's kind of the place that you sit. You know, you don't really go other places to sit. You sit at the head of your lodge. And so when you're talking about where somebody lives at, you talk about where they sit at, because you tend to sit in places that you're comfortable. And in your house, it also makes sense in the modern day, because most of the time you sit at your house. And so when we're talking about being at home or living someplace, we describe it 99% of the time as sitting there. And so nitsadalpi, I sit at, it's a statement. Samakitsadalpi is a question. It's not stating that you're sitting there. If you wanted to state that you're sitting there, you'd say gitsadalpi. But since it's kind of up in the air, it's abstract. Gitsadalpi. And then we just add tsima to make it a question. And then now that this is the other part of the non-factive, the negative part, this is how we can use it. So netayoka, I accidentally placed an S in there, so just ignore that. Netayoka means I'm sleeping. Netayoka. And so ayok means to be sleeping, essentially. And then if you wanted to negate that, to say that you're not sleeping, you could say, nimatayoka. Nimatayoka. So you notice two things are different with I am sleeping, netayoka, and I'm not sleeping, nimatayoka. So the first thing is mat, which is it's the main negative, essentially. It's the main thing that you use in negation to state that something's not happening. So you could look at mat as meaning not. And then this is kind of just adding emphasis to it's not happening. It's like I said, this is non-factive. And so we just use it to kind of clarify that something's not currently happening, if that makes sense. Another example, nitsinan. Nitsinan. I have money. If you wanted to say I don't have money, nimatsinan. Nimatsinan. So hopefully you could kind of see what we're doing here. We add mat, which means not. So saying I not have money, essentially. And then ishp. Technically, you could, some speakers do this, they omit the ishp. So you could say nimatsinan, because mat is the main thing in here. But it's just a little bit more proper to add this non-factive, because it's not a fact, you know. Because since you're dealing with money, and if you're saying you're not having money, then it's not a fact that you have money, if that makes sense. And so when something's not happening, we use this ishp. And so here's a cultural point about the conversation that I just showed you. And so it is pretty common when you're meeting someone to ask them where you come from, who your family is, or even where you live. And I have noticed that a lot of different cultures that are not my own, as in non-native cultures, non-Blackfoot cultures, they find it a little bit rude if you kind of ask where someone's where they're from, or if you ask about their family, or if you ask where they live. But in Blackfoot, just the culture that we have, it's very common to ask someone where they're from. It's very common to ask about their family. It's very common to ask kind of their origins, where they come from, because you're kind of just trying to establish a connection. And so a lot of the time in Blackfoot, you kind of ask questions that might seem prodding, That might seem a little invasive, but that's not really how it is. It's just kind of how we talk. We just kind of ask these questions, and then culturally, it's just the norm for us. But anyway, Genye. That's the end of the lesson. I'll talk to you all later.